This episode is the second in a two-part series. If you haven't heard the first part, go back and listen to episode 28. Thank you, and back to the episode. Last week, we left off with Darren and Trisha both grappling with burnout and questioning their artistic paths. Trisha decided to return to her roots, seeking solace and self-discovery in the comfort of her family and the loving embrace of her mother's home-cooked meals. Meanwhile, Darren was undergoing a period of deep introspection and pondering his place in the world. He began to consider whether his skills and passion could be put to greater use beyond the confines of his studio. Consequently, he set off to Skid Row with the intention of extending a helping hand to the homeless, eager to make a positive impact in any way he could. How did they find each other again, and how did they become GIORGIKO? Let's find out just that on today's episode. This is the Myartisreal podcast, a narrative journey into the lives that shape art. I'm Jacob Johnson, and today's episode, GIORGIKO, Part.2. Right after the break. This episode is brought to you by the Myartisreal Patreon page. This show wouldn't be possible without the support of all of you. If you enjoy this show, please head on over to patreon.com/Myartisreal and sign up today to get bonus content while supporting the show and allowing us to improve the quality and to make more content for you. Thank you for listening and enjoy the episode. Our story unfolds today on the gritty streets of Skid Row, where Darren has formed a connection with a young man. Darren's unwavering determination is focused on guiding this individual toward recovery from addiction and overcoming the challenges of homelessness.
But there was a series of kind of really traumatic events that happened while I was down there. The main one really culminated in this young man. He was like maybe only 2 years older than me, was homeless. I developed this really deep friendship with him. He was a heroin addict. He kind of, was estranged from his family and was really alone. We just developed this friendship over the year. And there was a certain point where he basically hit rock bottom and just was like ready to kind of just be done with life and everything. And at that point, I just felt like, hey, like there's an opportunity here, like, for you to kind of get out of this lifestyle. So I helped get him housed, and he got him on a methadone regimen and took him to the clinic and stuff, and reconnected him with his family, and like everything was so positive, like he got clean, started to have vision for his life. His parents were so excited, they were like, man, we haven't talked to him for years. And then basically he ended up relapsing and then overdosing and passing away. And that was just really traumatic for me in a sense of like thoughts of like, did I do enough?
Darren felt a heavy sense of remorse over the recent events, began to question whether his efforts had been sufficient to help the young man. Despite giving his best, the experience had deeply shaken him and compelled him to once more reflect on his life's purpose.
But that was a healing journey for me that I had to go through. And then ultimately, I kind of felt like I was called back into art because I kind of just didn't know what to do at that point. And I remember kind of having this dialogue, in a sense, in my mind, in prayer. I was kind of like arguing with God, like, because I kind of felt like I was supposed to go back to school. And I was like, why would I go back to school when there are people suffering? Like, I don't want to do this. This is like, it feels so selfish, right? But then this thought just kind of entered my mind, like, no, it's selfish for you to kind of just like do what you feel like you want to do. Like it's selfish for you to like think that you know better what to do with your life, and you see people suffering and you think that you feel like helping people, so then you think that's the best thing. So I just felt like I had to kind of put my faith that in God that, okay, if I'm supposed to go back to school, let's just trust God with that and let's just kind of see what happens.
I've long held this belief that art stands as one of the most precious creations of humanity. It possesses a timeless quality that permits us to weave narratives and stories, and we can evoke joy and sadness, and most importantly, stimulate deeper conversations about the world and society's norms. For Darren, art would end up being his way of aiding others, and perhaps remaining within the confines of his studio was in fact one of the most selfless acts he could undertake. Now Darren is back at the Art Center, focused on graduating. It took Trisha a bit longer to make it back. She tried out a couple of courses in community college and had some jobs, but eventually decided she also needed to return to Art Center.
While I was taking a break, other people graduated and went off and made these huge names for themselves and, started these amazing, awe-inspiring careers. And I was trying to remember how to do things. I was like, how do I do this again? Like, I don't remember, this anatomy or that medium or whatever. So there's this sort of weird starting over in some sense.
The first time she was at Art Center, she was purely focused on getting her work done and passing the class. There were some good times here and there, but it was mostly stress. This time around, Trisha had a new approach to her art and was focused more on what she wanted to say and why she wanted to make art instead of feeling forced to create.
I felt more freedom, or was trying to work towards freedom in my artwork, and trying to figure out style, trying to figure out what do I want to say? What does my artwork mean? As opposed to like, I just need to get this done, so I'm not going to sleep for 3 days in a row. Before it was just survival mode, and it was just like, I just hope I'm not the worst one in the class, because it would be so humiliating if I were. Like it was more just survival instinct before, and the second time around, it's like, what does this mean? What is the purpose of this? So a little bit more introspective and philosophical.
Art also became a way for her to sort out her thoughts and her uncertainties about the future.
Still in a place of growing and examining myself at the time. And so I was struggling with my artwork, and just so many insecurities were coming out during that time. But I think it's good that they were coming out into the light so that I could take a good look at them. So it was challenging, because no one ever wants to look their own insecurities in the eye. No one wants to see their faults. But I was seeing a lot of it, and it was pretty ugly. And so art in some ways also became a very cathartic sort of vehicle for me too. Like, I'm not feeling so good, and a drawing would come out of that, or a painting would come out of that. They weren't good, but they weren't for anyone. They weren't for assignments. It was for myself, and it was a way for me to process. And it's funny, because I feel like that's really natural for kids or young people to do. And then once art turns into work, there's a whole different struggle with that.
This time around was also less stressful for Darren, as he was able to let loose and not take every criticism so hard.
I was less trying to impress the teachers and the students, because I think I was just coming back from being on the street, having shootings happening and stabbings happening around me and stuff like that. So I was just kind of art to me still just felt like I still didn't understand why. I was literally there because I felt like I was supposed to be there. So when my work would be getting critiqued and being ripped apart by the teachers, I didn't take it so personally. I was kind of like, all right. So in that sense, I think already I felt like, the artist identity was already kind of in the unhealthy way, where it's like, that's what you're tied to, was already kind of being taken away from me as I entered college. But then that happens even to a greater degree when I came back from kind of being in the inner city. I just kind of was able to hear the critique and kind of just be like, yeah, that's true. Maybe there's a better, more healthy self-confidence.
After each of their separate breaks, they found themselves back at Art Center and ready to rekindle their relationship.
If we had started dating right after that magical drive, I don't know if things would have turned out well at all.
That's true.
So yeah, during our little sort of friendship break and my school break, I just grew up and changed so much. And so by the time I came back to Art Center, I think that was just the right timing to start dating and grow this relationship in a new way. And it was still really hard at that time. There's just so much to unpack with, the self, with insecurities and anxieties. I still struggle with a lot of anxiety and insecurity, here and there these days. So I know it's just kind of a lifelong lesson and journey. But even just those 2 years of wrestling with that away from Darren, so there's not that pressure of dating or relationship, but just me and myself and God, we're going through a healing journey. We're figuring things out. I think that made such a huge difference in determining how our relationship went when we did finally start dating.
So when did you start dating exactly?
We started dating my last semester at Art Center, so 2011.
It was right after I came back to school.
It was Trisha's first semester back to school.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And so how did that go? Did you just ask her out?
Yeah, I think I did, huh?
I feel like we were kind of, it was like an elephant in the room.
Yeah, we kind of knew it was going to happen. Kind of took the pressure off of me, at least in the uncertainty of like, is she going to say yes or not? But it was, just like anything, it's still scary. Yeah, and we also, mind you, this was our first dating relationship, both Trisha and I. Mm-hmm. So we really didn't know what to expect. We were kind of like, what are we supposed to do? How are we supposed to function as a dating relationship? Mm-hmm. Like I remember even calling Trisha my girlfriend was like really weird for a long time. And it's funny, at Art Center, a lot of people saw us together as friends. And they were like, yeah, that makes sense. Like they just kind of like, oh, I assume that you guys were dating this whole time. So when we would say like, hey, we're dating now, they were just kind of like, yeah, so like whatever. Like we thought you guys already were.
Before long, Darren was ready to graduate. But what did he have planned next? Well, he had no clue.
I have no clue. Like, I just like painting, and that's it. Like, painting in my mind is like, and they were kind of like, it's not a career. It's funny because you talk to people who don't know anything about art, and they're like, oh, did you go to college for drawing or painting? Because like, that's kind of their idea of what an artist is. And that's literally almost the way my mind was. I was like, I don't know what I want to do. All I know is that I kind of like painting, and that's it.
Sure, you can graduate and just start painting and trying to get your art seen, but it's very difficult. You can also focus on other industries like getting a job in design and advertising, but nothing felt quite right for him.
I just remember doing those kind of mock interviews with different industry people, and I just really have nothing. I feel like I really didn't know. I kind of was just, again, this is where our faith really ties into our career. I was just trusting God that there was some purpose for our life, and in that sense, maybe the same's irresponsible, but I was just kind of like, I didn't feel the pressure that I had to make something of myself.
So, Trisha, when you got ready to graduate, how were you feeling?
I was feeling stressed. I feel like that's in like everything I'm saying in this whole episode. It's just I was stressed at this and I was stressed at that. Yeah. But yeah, I was stressed because when I decided to come back to school, similar to Darren, I just felt like I was supposed to do it, but that didn't make the future any clearer for me. So I just thought, like, am I supposed to just get my degree and then become a dentist? No, just kidding. But, that doesn't necessarily mean I'm going to have an art career. I couldn't see that far into the future. And, for a lot of the students after the foundational years, they kind of know what they want. And so they start picking their classes carefully to build towards the career that they want. Mm-hmm. And for me, I was like, I don't know what I want either, just like Darren. So I was taking super random classes like, oh, that sounds fun. That sounds fun. That sounds fun. And so by the time it was time to graduate, I was a little flustered because some of our other classmates, by the time they were graduating, they had already secured jobs. They already had a definitive style and were already growing like a list of clientele, like all these very professional things.
Because she had just started to fully embrace her art, she was still finding her voice and wasn't sure of what she wanted to do with her art either.
For myself, I felt like I was barely scratching the surface of the kind of art I wanted to do. Again, I didn't even know what kind of art I wanted to do. And I didn't even know what style I wanted to do. I still didn't know what I wanted to say. I had just started trying to get comfortable with being uncomfortable and with the idea of failing at something. So, by the time I graduated, it was this very uncomfortable feeling of like, what do I have to show for myself for these long years and for all these monies that I put into this? Like, I don't know if I have anything concrete to show that I spent my time well.
While she didn't realize it then, it's now seeing where she has come that all that time spent exploring her mind opened up the doors to make her current art.
But I think looking back now, all the growth was in me, and that it was really a springboard into that artistic journey. So I'm still really thankful that I went to the school and then I graduated. And I definitely couldn't have anticipated where we are currently in our career with being in the fine arts world. Like that was at the bottom of my list in terms of career options. Yeah. I was thinking more like commercial or entertainment based or like making books, making toys. Like I was thinking on the other end of the spectrum. And so it is very mind boggling when I look at what we're working on, right now. And I never could have predicted that. But so much of it, just came from being uncomfortable. And school made me very uncomfortable for the whole time I was there.
While they were both finishing up at Art Center and not sure what they would do next, they each found a job teaching art to children.
So while we were in college, we both had a teaching job, teaching kids, at an art school. And I came upon this job, which led Trisha into this same teaching at the same school, because I was looking for an easy job to just kind of make some money. And I was like, okay, well, I'm already learning stuff at art school. I feel like, I'd never taught before, but maybe I could figure out a way to teach, what I'm learning. So I told a friend, I was like, hey, I'm looking for an art teaching job. Yeah, he was kind of like, okay, like, I think I know of one. Let me kind of refer you. So I was like, okay. And I remember I was driving down the street and I was at a stoplight, and I turned and I looked to my right, and there was this building. I thought it was a really ugly building. It distinctly stood out to me, and I actually pointed at it, and I actually laughed, and I said, I will never work at a place like that, because it was an art school. I was like, I would never work at an art school like that, and I drove off.
And I'm sure you can guess where this is going.
And then my friend called me that week, and he was like, hey, like, the art school has a position open. Do you want to go in for an interview? I was like, yes, give me the address. And he gave me the address, and I was like, oh my gosh, I think that's the art school that I pointed at last week. And so I went in for that interview. Sure enough, it was that place. And I really did not like it. I really wanted to leave from the moment I had interviewed. But again, I just saw this weird providential thing where I was like, this is weird. That I literally was like, I'll never work there. And this is the door that kind of opened. So I kind of just took it in stride, and I was like, okay, let me just try it out.
Well, he did more than try it out.
And so I worked at that art school for 3 years. I think 2 of the years I was no. 1 of the years I was still in school, but the other 2 years were after I graduated, and that kind of was like my stable income. But I really didn't like it the whole time I was there. But through it, I think I learned a lot. I learned a lot from the owner of the business, and Trisha worked there as well. She wasn't sure if she liked it. In all reality, both of us were kind of trying to figure out how to get out of it and kind of move on.
This art school quickly became more than either one of them could expect. The owner offered them the option to take over the school entirely.
At the time when both of us were leaving that job, the owner of the school basically, she just felt like she was supposed to kind of offer us the opportunity to buy the school, to take the school from her. It wasn't a buyout, and she was going to give it to us. But in some sense, it was kind of like a buyout. So we didn't want to do that. We basically ran away from it for a year, where we were just like, no, like, please, no.
Accepting the offer proved to be a challenging decision for both Darren and Trisha. They grappled with the notion that assuming control of the school might mean giving up their own dreams of establishing careers as artists.
But again, as we were struggling, and this is where we saw this internal struggle. We were thinking, like, we went to Art Center, we invested this money and time. We and this is very selfish thinking. Like, we can't just become art teachers. Like, we want to make a career. Like, we want to have a career and see what our maximum potential is, instead of kind of just like never pursuing that and just teaching art. And I think that's where we realized, like, okay, like, there's a lot of selfishness in our pursuits and all these different things. And we started to, as we prayed about it and stuff, started to fall in love with this idea of, like, sharing, in a sense, like, our gifts and our talent with kids, and I think as we fell in love with that vision, we became more open to the idea of taking the school. And then eventually we decided that that's what we were going to do. But we really saw it as like, if we take the school, we're basically ending our art career. Because it's not just teaching, we're becoming business owners, and there's so much that goes along with that.
Soon, they gave in and agreed to take over the school. So when exactly did you take it over?
Officially?
Yeah.
2017.
2017. But prior to that, Trisha did like a 2-year internship.
I was the assistant.
She was the assistant director for 2 years. And that was, again, in the interim where we're like, I don't know if we really want this. So it was this very long, drawn-out process of acquiring the school. 2017, we fully acquired it. It was completely our business.
What was that stress like for you to take over the business?
So I had some struggles with anxiety, but I had like panic attacks for the first time when we were rushing to business, because I think just the pressure of expectation. I think at the height of our school, we had around 100 students. So that's a lot of families to manage, a lot of expectations.
And how did you deal with that stress, Trisha?
Yeah, it's kind of funny. I feel like, I don't know, that God just really protects us, because I think Darren and I tend to have anxiety at different times.
Yes.
Thank God, because if we were both spiraling, I don't know what would happen. So it's just weird. There are plenty of times that I'm just super stressed, really anxious about things, and Darren's able to encourage me, comfort me, challenge me. And then like a week later, the roles flipped.
Yeah.
Like Darren is like spiraling. He's having a panic attack. And I'm like, we'll be fine. We have no money, but it's good. It's all good,
Yeah.
So I think that is a really big benefit to partnership, especially when we're able to encourage each other forward instead of dragging each other down into despair.
Despite their demanding roles in managing the school, they remained committed to their art and made a conscious effort to continue their creative endeavors.
And at the time, we were doing our own artwork. And that's actually when Trisha and I were exploring, our collaborative work. That's the first time we really started to collaborate. But we had no goals of it becoming anything. It really was, in our minds, an integrity thing where we're like, if we're teaching kids art, we should be doing art. It was like a mantra that we had at our school. Those who teach should do. We wanted to stay in that kind of battleground, that artists and creatives struggle in. Like when you're creating something, it's hard and there's a lot of things that you struggle with. We wanted to have that same struggle so that as we taught the kids, we could relate to their struggle,
Then, soon as things started to get better and they began to turn a profit, the pandemic hit.
2020 was the first year where our business was in the black, where we were actually making an income and able to save money. And then we lose the business. It was the first year where we got out of debt. It was 2020. We were like, yes, we finally get to build, and then it gets kind of taken away. So it was a huge learning journey, and we still look back on it and kind of pull out a lot of things that a lot of life lessons from it. But yeah, there's no time in our life I think that was more stressful. Very stressed, overworked, working 10, 12-hour days, that was normal, and we did that for three years,
It was a very stressful time, in the 3 years of owning the business. And then, of course, like the pandemic, the shutdown, like all that was its own crazy experience. But I would say overall that the struggle really led to a lot of growth. And it just took a lot of humility, honestly.
Despite their best efforts to sustain the school, the relentless challenges posed by the pandemic ultimately forced them to make the heart-wrenching decision to permanently close the institution.
It was painful. There were a lot of tears. It's still painful, even to a certain degree, to think about it, because in a sense, at least how we ran our art school, like we're talking to the kids about their family life, their homeschool, their friends, what they're into. Like it was so much more than just teaching art. On top of that, just the more selfish things, like I think the statistic is like, what was it? 90% of businesses close down in their first
Like 5
5
years.
years, something like
Yeah.
that, right? Or 3 or 5 years. And I just didn't want to be that statistic.
Mhm.
It was like 3 years and then we lose the business. I'm like, oh man, we're a failure. One of those failed businesses, you know.
But through that heartbreaking event would come growth.
And Trisha's parents are really into gardening. And I remember them pruning their fruit trees. And when they prune them, it literally looks like they're killing the tree. It's like there are no branches on it. It's like, it's not how a person who's thinking about pruning would actually prune. If you know what you're doing, it's like it looks dead. Right? It's like you did too much, man. Like you cut off everything. But that was the image I had in my mind, and I felt like that's what, in a sense, God was doing in our lives. That there was this pruning that was happening, and when you think about pruning, the intention of the gardener is not to kill the plant. It's actually for the plant to bear more fruit in the following season. So that kind of just really stuck with both Trisha and I. That okay, we're losing the school. Everything we had worked on and built is being cut away, but the heart of our care for the kids, our care to be generous, ability to teach and to share the gift has just grown, you know. And it's now that, in a sense, all the business stuff that was taken up, you know, like I was saying, 10-hour days, 12-hour days, all that stuff is now gone. Now we have a chance to rebuild, you know.
And it's important to know that they wouldn't have managed that challenging period of time without each other's support and companionship.
Because it's really easy to have like victim mentality. It's really easy to blame other people. It's really easy to make excuses. And Darren wouldn't let me. You know, he's really good at pointing me forward. And so I'm really thankful to Darren for doing that. And yeah, I just feel like it's just a point of, like I mentioned before, just looking the anxiety in the eye and like dealing with it. And so much of that just comes from just remembering who I am, you know, that I am a loved person. I am an important person, regardless of what I do or don't do, regardless of how other people perceive me, and even regardless of how I tend to perceive myself, that there's a greater reality beyond that. Because, you know, feelings, they come and go. I could feel great about myself one day and horrible the next. But that doesn't change who I am or who I'm supposed to be, you know. So I just feel like learning that lesson repeatedly of like, there's something greater than me. There is good plan for me. I have security in things that are not prone to change, you know. These are things that I can hang on to when I am like spiraling and having a really hard time, or, you know, again, want to slip into like the victim mindset, or, you know, these sort of insecurities. So yeah, it was hard, but I'm really thankful for it. I really learned a lot these past several years.
And I always want to jump in there too, because 100%, you heard from me, like, it was stressful. Like, that was my experience. I was like really stressed. And Trisha really was a rock for the 3 years, and then definitely that last year, 2020. Like she just, yeah, it's so strange because she does struggle with anxiety, maybe in some ways on a day-to-day level, sometimes more than I do. On these big things, for whatever reason, she was just like, it's going to be okay. She's like, we would just pray together. I remember like hyperventilating, like in the bed one night. I was just like, my mind was spinning. I couldn't sleep. I was sitting up, sweating, like just hyperventilating. I could not control myself. And she was just, stroking my back, praying for me. And she's just like, it's going to be okay. We can trust God and it's going to be okay. And I don't know where I would have gone mentally, or, all these different things if Trisha wasn't there.
So you'd been making art together for a while before closing the school. So when exactly did that start, and why?
The seed of it for me was actually Trisha's last semester at Art Center. She had illustrated this children's book, and it made me cry. And I remember I was like, it's a kid's book, but there was something powerful about being able to distill deeply human emotion. And kind of the theme of it was this idea of shame and love. and love kind of overcoming somebody else's shame. And I was just really moved by it. And I was in love with Trisha's artwork from that because it was done so simply.
Later down the line, they would participate in a group show together where each artist would have to create a work of art on a Post-it note.
You know, we saw it as this very like fun thing where like, oh, like let's just try to do some Post-its together, you know. And for me, I was like, can I just paint one of your drawings, you know, or a few of your drawings? And that's really how it started. It was there was no plan to try to do work together or, you know, to try to fuse our styles long term. It was just kind of a project, you know, let's just have fun and do it.
Uncertain of the outcome, they embarked on their creative journey. To their pleasant surprise, they not only found immense satisfaction in their work, but also witnessed their creations being purchased. This realization marked the beginning of something truly amazing.
For my personal work, I hadn't really sold anything. I had sold stuff at shows, and then I would get all excited, and then I find out it was my mom who bought it, you know. And I was like, dang it, like that doesn't count, you know. That would happen, you know. That happened a few times, and I was so frustrated. I was like, God, nobody likes my work except for my mom. You know? But then the Post-it notes, yeah, they sold, and it was so funny because when they sold, and we had told the story multiple times, but it's like it never occurred to us that they sold. The first thought that came to my mind was, oh, Eric, the gallerist, who's an awesome guy, like, oh, he forgot to hang our work. You know, that's instantly what I thought. So I remember going up to him very tentatively, like, oh, I didn't see our work on the walls. Like, you know, did it get forgotten? You know, something like that. And he's like, oh, no. He's like, they sold. And we were like, they sold? Like, that's crazy. Like, we didn't expect that. So I think it was like for maybe 1 or 2 years after that, we just continued to do the Post-it show and then slowly kind of moved up to bigger and bigger canvases, you know.
And at the heart of their work is Trisha's sketchbook.
I shared the way I would describe Trisha's role is that she's the magic behind everything that we do. And that's because I cannot draw or imagine things that would be even remotely cute or endearing or anything that a lot of people feel from my work. Like there's a lot of heart behind it. And like Trisha said, sometimes she doesn't see these, or in the past, she hasn't seen some of the work before it's actually done. And that's because, but she's very much attached to it because I've always been emulating what's in her sketchbook, basically. Like where I draw my inspiration from is from her sketchbook. Like I will sit in the studio looking through it, laughing, getting emotional and crying. And like, it's just like, it's like, there's so much there, you know, that is a direct reflection of even Trisha's personality.
In the beginning, it was a lot of Darren bringing Trisha's characters and stories to the canvas. But as they have grown, they started to influence one another's work even more.
But it has become its own. So one thing that's very interesting is over the years, when it was just my painting and just Trisha's drawing, it was very clear that those were the two things that we were offering. But at this point, the painting style has informed Trisha's drawing style because now she draws her characters different than she did early in the GIORGIKO universe. And then same with me, painting wise, it's developed to, and it's kind of funny, it's actually going back now towards the type of painting that Trisha really liked from me that I used to do back in college. It's getting, for a season, it's really tight. It's starting to kind of get a little bit looser again. And so it's just interesting how things are developing. But the actual end result is becoming more and more something that I couldn't have really created myself and that Trisha couldn't have really created herself.
And so what do you two see for yourselves moving forward now in the art world?
I don't plan on kicking Darren out at any point.
Thank you.
Yeah, you know, it's kind of funny because this is something that Darren and I were just talking about, I think even last week, is I feel like there's such a struggle between that tension of dreaming, having the freedom to dream something, and then at the same time holding it loosely and not being disappointed if it doesn't work out. You know, because I feel like there's such a need for control in us anxious people. So it's easier to just not dream. It's easier to just do what you're good at, right? Yeah. It's just easier to be like, oh, this is my comfort zone. This is safe. I'm not going to be disappointed by this, you know. But on the other hand, there are dreamers whose feet never touch the ground, right? And then if it doesn't turn out the way that they hope, that is soul crushing. Dreams are from like your soul, right? And it's soul crushing when they're disappointed, when things don't turn out. And so how do we do both at the same time? How do we have freedom to dream, but be okay when life takes a turn? Whatever. So it can be from the most mundane to the most, you know, soul revealing sort of things. And so I think that that's something that I will continuously be thinking about and figuring out. How do we keep dreaming for GIORGIKO and not put ourselves into a box, but be okay with however the future leads us, with however God leads us, you know, because we just don't know. I said before, I had no idea we were going to end up in the gallery world, you know, and somehow we're here. So how do we just do a good job with what we have and be okay when life takes a turn?
Darren and Trisha had shared a deep-seated passion for art and creativity, but they had often dealt with uncertainty about their future. It wasn't until they allowed themselves to release their own expectations and follow their heart that some clarity began to emerge. Their journey was far from easy, and even now they're at an early stage in their careers, and there will most likely be more challenges ahead. But just like before, they have each other's support that will help them step back from that ledge of self-doubt. I feel like each episode in some way becomes a lesson, whether I mean for it to or not. So let's recap today's lesson. We learned a few things that I hope to remember throughout my days, and things I want you to remember if you're an emerging creative. 1, follow your heart. 2, know that it's okay not to be certain about life. 3, don't compare your journey to anyone else's. And number 4, and most importantly, through suffering comes growth. And without that growth, we can't achieve our goals. Thank you for listening to another episode. This episode was produced, written, edited, and everything else by me, Jacob Johnson. And thank you to everyone who supports us on Patreon. If you enjoy the show and want to see it improve while also getting bonus content, head on over to our Patreon page at patreon.com/Myartisreal. Thank you, and I will see you in the next episode.